Hey everyone. Today we're going to talk about belonging and why it's so difficult. From my personal experience, belonging has been one of the tougher aspects of my life. Growing up in Southern California, looking like I do, I didn't realize it until years later when I had more cognitive awareness and context how much my environment was really set up in a way where I did not belong, or at least did not feel like I belonged, right? There's the objective truth, and then there's the subjective reality. And I think what is perhaps the most accurate thing to say is that there was some amount of not belonging that was very contextual. And I'll speak a little bit more about this here in a moment. And at the same time, there was, and perhaps there is, the subjective experience that is maybe part of how I'm wired, right? If you're watching this, perhaps how you are wired as well. Speaking about the objective experience, recently I spent some time in Taiwan, where, as you can imagine, most everyone looks like me. And there's something that I experienced there that was just very different. I was sitting at a park watching the kids, watching the parents, watching everyone kind of doing their thing. And what I noticed is how free everyone felt. Free and safe to simply express and to be. And where, unlike what I experienced growing up in the States, there didn't seem to be a reason prescribed to why certain kids were the way they were that went beyond them just being kids. See, my experience growing up was that when I would do something, it was, oh, he's that way because he's Asian, or he's that way because of this. He's that way because, oh, his parents are immigrants. Oh, he must not understand because of this, that, and the other, based off the way that I look and how my ancestral culture is, let's say, different than basic American. And how, because of that, there wasn't always the assumption of me being however I was, being okay, and being part of. And in fact, what I experienced, and I know this is something that people experience as well, is a lot of my, let's say, more creative things, my creative aspects. I'll put it this way. It was much too easy for people to say that those things were present because of all the reasons why I did not belong. And I know that sounds a bit paradoxical, and it kind of sounds like I'm going in a circle because it does feel like that. For me, belonging has, when I looked up this term of belonging online, version of it, it means to go along with, belong, means to go along with, to properly relate from. And what this speaks to me is how, if we look at this word, there's being, there's the be, but then there's the longing. There's something about the wanting of something, the wanting of being, right? So I believe as humans, we are intrinsically meant to, or I'll say it this way, I believe as humans, we were designed or are designed to be in communion. Humans that are on their own for too long tend, as a whole, to not do so well. So there's something about our intrinsic desire to be in connection, that has us longing to be. The challenge is that in our modern culture is in many ways is very adversarial to that. It's almost counter in the sense that if our humanity is union and connection, if we look at the way our systems, our structures, just a lot of things in our modern culture, the way they're set up, they seem to be counter to this idea of togetherness. There's this idea that if we separate people, if we create isolation, if we make people feel like they are not connected, then they'll want to be a part of that connection, in which case, in our modern culture, means buying something, spending money, putting our time, our energy, and our efforts towards things that are actually trying to solve the problem that the culture that's feeding us this way of solving the problem is actually creating. So it's essentially a way of saying the world is a bit wonky. And that if there's a part of you that feels or has felt or is feeling, the way I experience it is like this angst, right? This kind of like, feeling that there is a desire for more connection. And yet, just even this needing to reach somehow feels off, somehow feels a little bit like it should not be. What I've come to in my life, in my philosophy, is that this is correct. That if humanity was set out to be a little bit more cohesive, there would be more invitation and perhaps even more signage towards belonging being an intrinsic part of what it means to be human. And that for people like myself and for maybe someone like yourself who has ever felt like they did not belong and yet was confused why that was the case, and how there just seems to be something off, there's something amiss in our world. I think the message that I like to share is that you're not wrong, that we are meant to belong, and that perhaps our modern world is a bit wonky in the way that it allows and it provides us this sense of belonging. So what do we do? What do we do about that? I have or am still learning and growing in the idea that perhaps even if conditions were ideal, the first sense of belonging, maybe not the first, I believe the first sense of belonging is probably familial from our parents or from whoever our caregivers were. But perhaps a marker of maturity as we develop and we grow and our brains and all this stuff maturates, that perhaps the mature belonging is with ourselves. And I know that sounds super cliche. And yet in our modern world where distraction and denial and many other, a lot more D's, I'm sure, are the norm, to really begin or continuing the process of belonging to ourselves, to really bring that longing and shorten it a little bit. How do we do that? We spend time on our own. We spend time with our hands on our chest. We breathe before we act. We welcome ourselves in the mirror. We find creative ways to bring ourselves into the world, whether it's through art, creation, and once that's done, turning to it, giving it a smile, and welcoming it into this world that it now belongs to through your breath of creation. And as that expands, as that strengthens, we can begin to belong with and perhaps even to each other. So if you watch this to this point, know that you belong with me, whatever that means for you. For me, it means we are in conversation, and my presence is here to be shared with you, and perhaps your presence is here to be shared with me. And so, whatever that means, let's continue. And I look forward to sharing more and hearing from you in the comments below.